some men never truly understand the weight of courage until the sky around them turns into fire. It is the 29th of November 1943, and in the tail of the B-17, named Ricky Tiki Tavi, sits the tail gunner Eugene Moran. More than 300 American bombers are pushing through the cold air toward the heavily fortified industrial city of Bremen. With only 10 minutes left before reaching the target, every man is staring into the vast sky, searching for any sign of danger. When the inevitable call tears through the intercom, bandits at 12 o'clock high. The German fighter pilots know that if they strike straight in from the front, coming in level and fast, they can slip past the deadly arcs of the top turret gunner and the ball turret gunner of the bombers they plan to destroy. A full staffel of twin-engine Bf-110 fighters charges directly at the formation, each carrying a new and terrifying weapon, 21-centimeter Werfer Granate mortar rockets. The German pilots unleash a sudden storm of rockets that streak toward the compact box formation of flying fortresses. Up in the pilot seat of Ricky Tiki Tavi, the 21-year-old pilot, First Lieutenant Linwood Langley, hardly has time to understand what is happening before a rocket flashes past the cockpit so close it nearly grazes the glass. Geez, did you see that? Tail to crew, one fort is down. The rockets come first, and the guns follow. Now the Bf-110s are in range and open fire with everything they have. As the attackers roar past, the navigator Second Lieutenant Jesse Orison waits with the cheek gun ready. In a moment, the fighters pass the nose. Get them, Gene. At the back, Gene is prepared and fires a stream of rounds that pepper the German fighters as they pass and break away in pairs. Squinting into the distance, he notices smaller dots forming on the horizon. There are more coming. Bandits at 5 o'clock high. From above and behind comes a massive wave of German aircraft, more than Gene has ever seen in his life. Beef-109s and the feared butcher bird FW-190s dive toward the box formation. Chaos erupts. The sky becomes a violent swirl of turning planes and bright tracer lines. Geez, there are too many. Empty shells spill across the floor of the fortress as every gunner fires non-stop into the approaching mass. 3 o'clock level. The intercom is filled with overlapping shouts. Bandits at 12 o'clock high. I got one. I think they are peeling off. Watch out for Flak. Then the first dark cotton-like burst appears ahead. Flak at 11 o'clock low. The sky fills with 88mm flak bursts. Some German fighters break away, but many ignore the explosions and continue their attacks. The B-17 shudders violently as the flak bursts around them. American bombers are hit, and some drop out of formation, sinking behind and below. Pilot to bombardier. Curtis, are you ready to drop them? Yes, sir. Bomb bay doors coming open. The doors grind wide. The crew waits, nerves tight, until the lead plane begins its drop. Just drop the damn bombs, will you? The moment the lead bombardier releases, Donald Curtis follows. Bombs away. The plane instantly lifts as the weight disappears, and Lieutenant Langley turns the fortress toward home. Slowly, the flak fades. Damage report. Navigator okay. Ball turret okay. Only a few holes in the wings and fuselage. Looks like we are fine, Lieutenant. The captain can hardly believe it. The flying fortresses are strong. The pressure looks good. All 4 engines seem untouched and running smoothly. Relief washes through the plane. We are going to make it. But the echo of those hopeful words barely fades before another cry erupts. Bandits. They are back. Another wave of German fighters pours down from above. Get to the guns. The men freeze for a moment as they witness the overwhelming number of aircraft diving toward them. The Germans are returning for revenge after the bombing of Bremen. Show them, boys. The pounding of machine guns and the crash of exploding shells fills every ear as the entire American formation lights the sky with fire. 2 o'clock. 6 o'clock. The box formation shakes under constant strikes. Fortresses spiral down, but the crew of Ricky Tiki Tavi is too overwhelmed to notice. Gene tracks an FW-190 streaking by, then a Bf-109. He cannot tell if he has hit any of them, but he finds another target and keeps fighting. 2 o'clock high. Watch out. A sudden burst shakes the bomber, and it begins to drift away from the main group. Gene notices the widening gap. What is going on? He glances left and right. The engines show no smoke. A lone B-17 is vulnerable to fast German fighters. Separated from the formation, it is almost certain death. One by one, the crew speaks through the intercom. We are slipping back. What is going on? Langley. No answer. Gene shouts into the mic. What is the matter? Why are we not staying with the formation? The gap grows wider. Then a strained voice comes over the radio. We are being pushed out. No one can tell if it is the captain or the co-pilot. Soon, the Ricky Tiki Tavi is completely isolated. The Germans quickly see their chance. They surge toward the vulnerable bomber with deadly intent. Gunfire mixes with the screams of wounded men. The fortress flies level, but there is still no word from the cockpit. In interviews, Gene could hardly speak about what happened next, but in the book Tailspin, written by Gene's close friend, it is recorded that from the bottom of the bomber, the ball turret gunner Wilbert P. Wee Provost, Gene's closest friend, screamed, "Mo, there is a son of a bitch coming up at us. It is coming right up our ass." "Buddy, I am done," Gene shouted for him as shots cracked into the plexiglass dome. A scream tore through the intercom as a twin-engine German fighter shot upward past the tail and flashed in front of Gene's guns. Gene fired his .50 caliber guns and hit the attacker. Smoke trailed behind the damaged fighter as it fell from view. The ball turret gunner was never heard again. Then a Bf-109 flew up alongside. The tail. Gene tried to swivel his guns, but the pilot stayed carefully outside the arc of fire. Gene locked eyes with him. The German motioned with his hand, pointing at Gene, then pointing downward. Gene stared in disbelief. The gesture repeated. Then it struck him. The German was offering him a chance to bail. Was he the only one left alive? Had the others died, or jumped already? He could see more German fighters waiting. It was a moment between life and death. But Gene never made the decision. Suddenly, gunfire erupted from somewhere in the bomber. Someone else on board was still alive and firing. The brief moment of mercy vanished, and the German fighter rolled away. At once, the waiting German planes swarmed in to finish the kill. The tail section was torn apart by metal fragments and shrapnel. Gene was thrown to the floor. He pulled himself back into his position and tried to fire, but his guns jammed. Working through instinct, he forced himself to clear one of the guns. Hope flickered as the weapon fired again, until a new burst of bullets slammed into him. He cried out as both arms were shattered, yet with 2 broken arms he managed to fire a few more rounds before another burst struck his chest, breaking several ribs. The tail position was now a scene of ruin. The aircraft lurched forward in its final descent. Gene felt pressure pulling him into his seat as the fortress plunged downward. His parachute was shredded, but a spare chute was stored near the tail wheel. He spotted some of the crew, lying motionless. A painful groan of metal filled the air as the tail section began to tear apart. He felt the floor shifting beneath him, almost dragging him backward. Clawing at anything within reach, he watched the sky appear behind him, and then saw the main fuselage rip away from the tail section. Holding on with all he had left, Screaming through his oxygen mask, he saw the Ricky Tiki Tavi fall away beneath him while he remained trapped inside the tail. In the nose, navigator Jesse Orison and bombardier Donald Curtis fired desperately at the fighters swarming around them. There were simply too many and far too fast. Bullets smashed the plexiglass, striking Curtis and throwing him back into Orison. The plane nosed downward. Fighting against the limp weight of his friend, Orison managed to strap a parachute onto him just before the nose shattered completely and threw Orison into the open air. Glass tore into his legs. Falling through the sky, he pulled the ripcord, screaming in agony. As he descended, he saw the tail of the Ricky Tiki Tavi spiraling downward. He remembered seeing the rudder and elevators fluttering wildly. He did not know his friend was still inside. At least 3 witnesses later reported watching the tail fall. Some stories even claimed Gene kept firing as he fell, but Gene himself said this did not happen. Inside the spinning tail, the force was unbearable. The spin pinned him in place, the pressure crushing him, a red mist covering his sight as blood seeped into his eyes. The fall felt endless. The tail plummeted until it smashed into the trees with a force no living man should endure. But Gene survived the impact. Through his blurred vision, he saw a faint light ahead, like a tunnel. He crawled toward it. Each movement shot pain through his broken arms. He felt the looseness of his teeth. Still, he crawled. Suddenly, he dropped forward. He found himself lying on the forest floor. Above him, the tail section hung broken in the trees. For a moment he lay still, stunned that he was alive. Reaching for his head with his shattered arms, he felt a long crack in his skull and the softness beneath it. Soon he heard voices. He feared he might be discovered by angry civilians seeking revenge on downed crews. But the voices speaking French gave him hope. Expecting to find a corpse, French laborers from a nearby camp and several German soldiers found him alive. They dragged him through the forest and took him to a camp where a Serbian doctor operated on him and placed a metal plate over his exposed brain. Gene's injuries were more than physical. While recovering in a prisoner hospital, he suffered frequent nightmares of falling and screaming. In time he healed, and after the war he was released and returned home along with the only other survivor, Jesse Orison, who remained his close friend for life. In the year 2022, 8 years after Gene's death, his friend John Armbruster published Tailspin, the book that tells Gene's extraordinary story. It remains a remarkable work that we strongly recommend. Did you hear about the ball turret gunner who fell without a parachute and lived? Yes, that is one story everyone should know.